The common question is when is the right time to move into a memory care unit? And I guess I should probably start by giving the basics of assisted living versus memory care versus nursing home. So we at the Meadows of Wadena have both traditional assisted living as well as assisted living memory care units. We decide, along with family and the resident, as much as we can, when the right time is for that person to move into memory care. We try to base it both on families' beliefs about whether mom or dad is declining to the point where they where family is uncomfortable, that mom or dad is safe in their own environment and may become a wander risk, or they've become too forgetful, or there's just a general cognitive decline. So from the family's perspective, that's very important that they weigh in on that. We try to use some empirical guidelines as well. We, here at the Meadows, specifically use something called the Claudia Allen Cognitive Scale, which is an occupational therapy-based scale that tries to determine how somebody is doing from a cognitive perspective. It starts at a scale of 6 and works down to 0, and we try to assess them. At some point, people's cognition has declined to a point where they're no longer able to do certain of the basic activities of daily living on their own from a cognitive perspective. And at that point, it would make more sense if they're either a wander risk or they are unable to dress or undress on their own and need cueing because they are dressing inappropriately, putting on, as an example, putting their underwear on over their pants, or they are saying inappropriate things and or having some difficulties with aggressive behaviors or agitation or things like that. So it's a combination of our professional assessment through this activity-based occupational therapy model, as well as from the family's input and kind of general assessments. So the difference between traditional or standard assisted living and assisted living memory care is kind of a gray area. There's no perfectly black line that we can use as a measure, but the services that we provide typically are greater in memory care than they are in the assisted living. We take care of all of the physical needs that we can in assisted living, things like helping with dressing and undressing, helping with some basic, with medication management and administration. And we do all of those things in memory care as well. But on top of that, we help with things that become more difficult as dementia, as cognition declines. Things like toileting and cueing for dressing, reminding people that it's time to use the restroom as opposed to waiting for an incident to occur. So we try to stay on top of those types of things. We try to help manage their activity level a whole lot more than we do in the assisted living, the general assisted living, where people have the ability to just kind of come and go and choose and pick which activities they want to participate. We try to create in memory care a much more structured environment where the activities are based on their level of cognition, and we try to keep them more active throughout the day. And structure their environment accordingly. One of the key distinctions between assisted living and memory care is the security that our residents have within the memory care unit. Specifically, in order for our residents to be safe and not worry about them wandering, which is a common, it's a common problem for many people with dementia is that they wander off. In professional terms, it's called elopement. And we worry very much. In Minnesota, we have such drastic weather, both hot and cold, that if a resident who is suffering from dementia were to get out, they may get lost and something terrible could happen. And so we're able to provide that security by having a locked area that provides that security to avoid the worry of elopement or wandering off. The best way that we can determine a person's level of cognition that we're aware of is by using the Claudia Allen scale, which is an occupational therapy-based and occupational therapist administered test that determines their level of cognition. It's on a level of 6 down to 0 or 1 to show their level of decline. It's a rather easy test conducted by an occupational therapist, takes about an hour, and it really gives us a great benchmark to start for our residents to know where they started when they arrived in our building. It also gives family the opportunity to see empirically, objectively, where mom has started and where she is now, if she has declined. If you believe mom has declined or dad has declined, you'll have now a basis by which to judge where they were and where they are now. It also might provide, if they haven't changed in their level of cognition, that might indicate some other medical issue that might be going on, a urinary tract infection or something else that might be causing some level of confusion. So my advice to anybody that's struggling with, how do I know how if it's the right time for someone, to mom or dad, to go into memory care, my advice to almost anyone is use that Claudia Allen test. Ask your doctor to have an occupational therapist administer that. It'll give you a baseline so that maybe now is not the right time. Maybe now they're at a 4.9. It wouldn't make any sense for them to be in a memory care unit. However, 6 months later, you think that they may have declined. Let's have them tested again, and now we've seen a decline, and it might very well make sense for us to start seriously thinking about that change, or at least creating more stimulation in other ways so that we're aware of it and keeping a closer watch so we don't have to worry about wandering, we don't have to worry about other safety issues. People are always concerned about whether their mom and dad are going to be engaged and not bored in their environment. And one of the reasons that they move into either assisted living or memory care is to create a sense of socialization and engagement. Here at the Meadows, our goal is to try to accomplish all of those goals, as well as meet the needs of our residents with respect to something called sundowning. Sundowning is typical in people who have dementia, who are not engaged and not stimulated throughout the day. And in those cases, what ends up happening is in the evening and into the night, because they've been less stimulated during the day, it creates an environment where they get agitated and look for stimulation into the evening and at night. And that causes problems where their rest patterns get out of alignment, and their overall level of stimulation is mistimed with respect to the normal schedule throughout a day. So we try to create an environment of routine where every single day there is a pattern by which their activities are based on, and they'll start out every day with the same routine and go through the day, and we have found that with those activities on this regular schedule, routines are established, and there's a dramatic reduction in sundowning. It's always a challenge to create an environment that is engaging for residents with different levels of cognition. Somebody who may move in today into our memory care area maybe at a higher level of cognition than somebody who's been in our area for, say, a year or two, and we've seen their dementia create a further decline in their cognition. How do we do that? How do we create an environment that balances the activity level of somebody at a higher level of cognition versus a lower level of cognition? Well, our activity program tries to address that by regularly assessing their Allen scale, which I mentioned earlier, and creating an activity program for each resident that is based on that level. You saw earlier in the videos that people participate in in similar activities. For instance, somebody may do a puzzle with a higher level of cognition without as much cueing, and somebody may need help and get a cueing card underneath the puzzle to help create success. Moreover, we're trying to constantly engage them, again, to avoid the problems of sundowning. And if we can get a routine established, then we are able to relearn, so that we actually see our residents expect that they are going to do something every day that is the same. So for instance, we have something called Beauty Barber, and every morning after the resident has been assisted in getting dressed, they'll actually have their breakfast, and they're used to that routine. Then after breakfast, they go through a grooming process, and that is their activity, and they're used to doing that. After that, there's another scheduled activity that is the same. This may sound boring to you or me, but it creates a routine, and it allows our residents to learn that this is what I do. And we've actually seen that fairly regularly in our residents, that they come to expect that now is exercise time. And then the next activity might be something that they're used to doing, whatever it might be, and it allows them to stay engaged throughout the day, and we've avoided that sundowning problem. There's a constant concern, both among our seniors as well as family members, about how on earth are we going to be able to afford to pay for the care that is needed for mom and dad. And I know that parents, my parents, and everyone's parents seem to struggle with that dilemma. Can I actually afford? I don't want to be a burden on my children. I don't want to use all of my resources for this. Well, it's always a challenge. We try very hard, and have successfully, in the 18 years I've been doing this, we've never turned anybody away because of finances. There are different programs through the government that we can tap into to help provide some assistance. There's the Medicaid Program. The Medicaid Program finances through what's called the Elderly Waiver Program for those people that cannot afford to provide for themselves, pay for the services themselves. In addition to that, there's something called the Housing Support Program, used to be called Group Residential Housing, which pays for their actual apartment and some of the other typical housing pieces. On top of that, if one of our residents is a veteran and served during certain select periods, the Department of Veterans Affairs actually helps pay for assisted living. We do our very best to try to help our residents and their families navigate the rather complicated financing programs, and hopefully can get them qualified for the programs. Advice to caregivers. I struggled with my own parents trying to determine, can they safely live in their home, or do they need more help than I can provide? And there's that constant feeling of guilt that, oh gosh, I don't want to put mom, I promised mom or dad I'm not going to put them in a nursing home. Well, that's a reasonable goal, as you can see by looking at the environment here, we try very, very hard to create a non-institutional environment. Our environment has soft floors, warm colors, and we try to not create that stigma of an institution with brick walls and hard floors and echoes. It's a quiet place that can create a place of gathering and socialization instead of a place to just sit and be slumped over in a day chair watching The Price is Right, or just sleeping while The Price is Right is on in the background. It's a real challenge to try to figure out when is that right time. Clearly there are certain safety measures. If mom or dad is falling regularly, if mom or dad is constantly getting locked out of their house and or wandering off and we can't find them and we're seriously concerned about their actual safety, then those are kind of clear markers. Some of the other things, though, that are less apparent are the social aspects. Did mom or dad used to be a very social creature and now their friends have, because of their own issues, been distanced? And as a result, mom or dad is by themselves an awful lot and their best friend becomes the remote control and they're just waiting to get the phone to ring so that their son or daughter can call. Assisted living and memory care in general, the idea there at least is to try to create a social environment. And one of our other buildings uses the tagline, "It's never too late to live happily ever after." We don't want this to be a place to just kind of watch the end of life occur, but rather a new step to re-engage. And we see that with a lot of our people who had been on a steady decline and the kids just worry about them, don't know exactly what to do. And it both relieves some guilt for the children, but it also, more importantly, provides an environment where we can see seniors start thriving again instead of sitting in a dark room watching TV by themselves. They're now engaged. They have 3 meals a day with other people. They have activities with other people. They get to talk and exchange ideas, the things that make life meaningful again. I'm part of the sandwich generation where I have kids, and unfortunately now I don't have parents. But when I was part of that genuine sandwich generation where I had both my parents and my kids, I struggled. What do I do? How do I take care of my kids and I take care of my parents? And the guilt that surrounded me as I thought, well, gosh, I want my mom and dad to both be safe and more engaged. Do I dare suggest that they move into assisted living or memory care? Because I know the natural response is, you're going to put me in a nursing home and I don't want to be in a nursing home. You promised me I wasn't going to be in a nursing home and now here you go. Again, our goal is not to create an environment as an institution, but rather as a new residence. We strongly encourage engagement from families, and that was an eye-opening experience for me with my parents, that if I could convince my mom or my dad that this was not just a place to just sit and be bored by themselves, but rather to be re-engaged, that would be very helpful. And it would relieve my burden and it would actually make them feel better. But as importantly, it allowed me to be there instead of the person who harped, "Mom, did you take your medicine? Dad, how are you doing?" and worrying about him. I could now just visit with them and enjoy their company, and they could enjoy mine without me being either the bad guy or the person who had to remind them, and instead pass the bad stuff on to someone else. And that's kind of what we here are trying to do at the Meadows. We try to parse off all the tough stuff, whether it's in assisted living and they no longer want to do their housekeeping or their laundry or have to cook meals, or in memory care where they otherwise would be so bored. Instead, they now have activities to keep them busy, and then we encourage the kids to come in and visit with them, and grandkids, and create a multi-generational environment, and it allows the kids to re-engage with mom and dad. Instead of just being the caregiver, they can now be son or daughter again.